monitoring and following issues of the East African community. One as a seasoned politician back home here in Uganda, but also as a person, member of the, that is the East African Legislative Assembly. Kenya today goes to the polls.
Yes.
And of course, we are all excited to see the outcomes of these elections. Yeah. But let's first take a look at the context of the East African community. What impact does Kenyan politics have on this community?
Of course, the impact is immense. It has got a security impact. There are a lot of uncertainties in terms of the interoperability of trade, particularly now that we are heading to the polls and given the historicity of Kenyan elections. Then it has got also an impact on the markets. For example, even when you look at financial markets right now, all the numbers are down simply because of speculative effects of what that kind of election can come up with. Economists call these ones contangos and arbitragoires. Now that is economics. Some people think it is just my English. But speculatively, those are people who can even begin to hold stocks on markets in the contemplation of a future rise or a future fall. So all those things are effects that we can ably look at. I can also safely tell you that it is a lesson to the East African community states. The growth of Kenyan politics has been a very substantial lesson for us. The trajectory that the politics has taken, right from, for example, the enactment of the 1991 Multiparty political dispensation law that eventually culminated into freedom of all political parties after Kanu by 1992 then. The establishment of the political parties then in Kenya that have transmogrified into the current ones. I can tell you that Kenya has followed the proper trajectory that all of us must emulate. We looked at somebody who had led that country for over 24 years, ceding power, but also had been joined by other political players in and out. A transition that was established in Kenya was a transition that had been planned by God himself when he took the founding father. And eventually the vice president took over. And of course he played around with all the cataclysms of the Saba riots and all of that, and he maneuvered through. I can tell you that we have a lot to learn from Kenya. Politics grew. Kanu would still win, but with a narrow margin, and simply because the Democrats under Kibaki and of course the Liberal Democrats under Raila Odinga could never work together. So when you would look at the numbers, you would still find that Moi was still continuously beating them by smaller margins. Now, when Moi eventually, on his departure, chose Uhuru to run on the Kanu ticket, you know, people are forgetting that Uhuru had lost an election before. But he chose him, Moi chose him to replace him. That is when now Liberal Democratic Party under Raila Odinga, as it then was, joined hands with the Democratic Party under Kibaki and formed the NAC alliance. Now that is when the alliance took over and they beat Uhuru. So that one also now interpreted itself into the capability by those that had been losing elections winning with the merger. So democracy now came in. It now came in. And anyone would now say that Kenya was a democracy. Now, we are also looking at the enactment of the 2003 Rome Statute that established the International Criminal Court. Now, that one was also, it became a player in the preceding elections in Kenya. Because then, we would look at the two protagonists appearing at the ICC. When, for example, there was Uhuru on one part, and there was Ruto on the other part. To the extent that Uhuru had supported the Kibaki too, and that Ruto had supported Raila. That eventually culminated into, of course, ICC cases. Then it became a uniting factor now that they now took power. One became a deputy president, the other became a substantive president for the 2 terms. Now, we are looking at again a cycle where now those that were actually caught at the ICC are no longer working together. and instead have taken contrary views and contrary directions, and instead Raila Odinga is now being pushed by Uhuru to take power, and Ruto has of course coached and coined the Kenya Kwanza notion to the extent that he also wants to take power. So when you look at Kenya, Kenya is a growing democracy.
Now, having given us that spate of growing democracy,
yes,
and lessons for other member states to, we are in the East African community, and in the inception of East African community, we had the pillars. We had dreams of how we want this community to be. Let's look at first, we talked about we had economic integration.
Yes.
And even with economic integration, Honorable, have we really achieved this? And does a sitting president of any member state, now that these are going in election, have an impact on determining the economic flow or agreements of the East African community?
First of all, I would tell you that there is some bit of misunderstanding, even by players in the East African cooperation, of course, the trajectory we are taking. There are people that think the East African community integration is an end in itself. That is not true. When you read, for example, the mind of the protagonists of integration, for example, I can talk of Nyerere and President Museveni. They are only looking at a clustered build-up for the sole purpose of achieving African Union, which is the ultimate game. The ultimate aim is the African Union. Now, the disparity between the two schools of thought, the philosophical rims at the subconscious level of the brains of those that are actually proponents of integration of the East African community and the African Union. You now look at the Gaddafi side, Muammar Gaddafi on one part, and the side of former President Nyerere, the late, and President Museveni. Whereas Gaddafi needed the declaration of an African country, these two thought that can only be achieved when you establish regional economic communities that can ultimately converge and establish an African country. So they are following theirs, and nobody seems to be pursuing now the original idea of just a declared African Union, African country. So it appears that when you look at the clustered economies that are being coached and coined, they are following up. I have seen people arguing and agitating against the inclusion of DRC, and obviously now we are looking forward to Somalia. And people are asking, and of course the original inclusion of the 2013 inclusion of course when we started now having the verification processes for South Sudan until ultimately having it included. People are saying these are countries that are, in terms of security, they are not reliable. You don't have security guarantees. You don't have substantive administrative processes and procedures in these countries. How do you admit such countries? Now the answer that these guys are giving you are, we are not admitting leaderships, we are admitting markets. And before any admission, of course, our people are already there trading. Admission is only official. We are only making sure that there are documents, laws and rules under which all the traders, the East African traders already trading in those countries are now being guided. So, your question, when you look at the current integration agenda, with the ultimate aim of establishing a political federation as the fourth limb. Now look and assess the first three limbs of integration that we are considering. And that is looking at the East African community as one country for customs purposes. Now that one is under the customs union. Protocol was signed, an act was enacted, and I can tell you that subject to, of course, non-tariff barriers, we are almost one country for customs purposes. Now the barriers available are not tax related, they are not tariff related. That's why we call them non-tariff barriers. They are generally established by fellows that have failed to understand and comprehend the integration agenda. Some of them are immigration officials, others are policemen, stopping all trailers. When we have established that a trailer that would run from Mombasa to Kampala in 3 to 4 months, now runs in 3 days, you still find a policeman stopping one for purposes that you should offload, and he counts and he sees the quality of the shoes that you are actually importing from abroad. Even when the quality of the shoe he's putting on is not actually guaranteed. So those are non-tariff. And I can tell you that in terms of that first limb, we are progressing properly. But these are not things that can generally be understood by the population. They can only be felt by those involved and touched by that stage. Now, taxpayers know that, for example, you can be assessed and accordingly make all the payments at Mombasa port. To the extent that here you just come with your goods and available to distribute. So, when we now get to another limb, which is the common market. The common market, the protocol was established, the acts were established. Of course, I have my own problems, especially with the annexes and with those articles that were not agreed upon. But I know those are things that can only be agreed upon. For example, if we are reaching the stage of political federation, and that is one Article 13, Article 14, dealing with land. Now, those ones were still reserved to partner states. They are not cooperation areas. I have seen candidates promising to deal with land and what, and then I know they don't know yet what they're
heading for.
Land is not a cooperation area. We still have a lot of problems in terms of, well, as the assembly, we have voted our way, and the bilateral corporations have also fought their way to the extent that work permit fees are being phased out. But at least, whereas we are getting there, our citizens still need work permits to work in this.
Now, Honorable, this is where I want to ask you,
Yes.
does the politics, or to be more specific, a leader at a particular time among the East African states, for example, now, for Kenya, you have Raila Odinga and William Ruto.
Yes.
Do these, much as we have these pacts, these agreements, does a sitting president at a time affect?
Of course. And you know why? Because a sitting president is a protagonist, is a player in the limb of integration where we have not yet cooperated. And that is political federation. So the decision, it is still a negotiated agenda. The East African community is not a country. And I am here to tell our people, please don't assume, don't begin asking, why haven't, for example, if there is an election in Uganda to which some people may think was not an authentic process. Why isn't Kenya coming here to do this and remove, and you know, we are not yet there. That
some wonder even what is the power of the East African court. Justice where people will go, but then even if judgments are passed, then sovereignty of another country comes in, and it doesn't make sense.
The power of a court to take decisions that are effectual on matters that are before it, for us lawyers, we call it jurisdiction. Now, the jurisdiction of the East African Court of Justice is interpretative in nature. It only interprets the treaty. Practitioners like myself have used the Article 6, Clause D of the treaty for the establishment of the East African Community to widen the realm of jurisprudence at the East African Court of Justice to begin to include slightly human rights causes. So, but now, of course, of recent, the summit of the heads of state took a decision in 2015, which has been now almost effectual, that the jurisdiction has now been increased to cover trade-related matters. So we are getting there. I can tell you that even when you rush there faster, you can still get a hiccup. When you look at the SADC court, for example, the SADC court had the jurisdiction to cover human rights. But in the case of Campbell versus Republic of Zimbabwe, which had something to do with land, that court almost collapsed. And I can tell you it is not yet back to its feet. So we don't need to rush, but we cannot stop moving. What you asked. Therefore, because we are not yet a federation, the decisions of a president of a partner state can affect the integration agenda. Why? Because decisions of the community are by consensus. Therefore, by any president reneging on a decision, that one it can stampede a decision from being taken. However, the treaty also has got a provision on variable geometry. Now, some lawyers know this, others don't. But if you are a lawyer who is interested in the law of treaties, variable geometry is where, for example, decisions are arrived at, but implementation can be done as and when a particular party that conceded to such a decision is willing. I can get you an example. If you look at the European Union, there are protocols that are signed. We can look at the protocol on immigration, for example. The immigration protocol and the protocol on monetary union. Britain, before it exited the European Union, was a signatory to both protocols. Protocol on monetary union, where the euro currency was being used in Europe, Britain was a signatory. But implementing it in their own country was as and when they would elect to do so. And by the time they left, they had never implemented it. So Britain was still using the pound sterling and not the euro. Number two, Britain was still a signatory to the protocol on immigration. It was therefore incumbent upon Britain to also use the euro visa. But viewers know that actually by the time Britain exited the European Union, it was still using its own substantive visa. So they were signatories, but you can choose as and when to implement. Now that is different. So a decision is arrived at by consensus, but implementation is as and when a partner state is willing to do so, or has capacity to do so.
We're still looking at the impact of Kenya's elections to the East African community, knowing that today they have gone to the polls to elect their 5th president. And of course, UBC will keep you informed of what is happening on our various social media platforms, but also on our programs. We have a team of reporters who are there. Dennis Goa left a couple of days and he camped in Nairobi, and he will be giving us more of those details, plus many others that have been deployed by the national broadcaster. Honorable Mukasa, let's also now looking at Kenya and of course this big East African community. You rightly talked about Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 as if we are seemingly moving. But there's one thing I find within the East African community amongst the leaders that you find, for example, Uganda. President Yoweri Museveni, one would say, is very passionate about the East African community and its growth. We have Paul Kagame of Rwanda, who even at one time we saw a bit of closing a border, and I remember you coming up with a term you called the East African spirit. I was wondering, now we are talking about spirit instead of what the law says. We have Tanzania that seems to be a bit slow and hesitant on some of these things. Kenya, we wouldn't, and their pace sometimes seems fast, sometimes they're hesitant. Now, where do you see the future regarding the different political also atmospheres that you have? You have here no term limits, you have a 2-term, you have a 7-year term. Congo is in maybe shutters, you don't know. South Sudan, they're still bargaining. So what do you...
And soon, of course, Somalia, without properly a country, will also join us. I can tell you that all of those can be dealt with. Now, there is a dichotomy between the cooperation itself and bilateral relations between the countries within the East African community. Now, you have cited a lot of things, but now when you look at, of course, what happened between Rwanda and Uganda, that was not, it had nothing to do with the East African community.
But one would see the spirit of East Africa community. You have a treaty on free movement of people.
Yes, all of those treaties can exist. But when you have rebels in a country neighboring you, and that country has not taken steps into having them either arrested, evicted, or anything, you cannot leave your borders open for them to crisscross the length and width of your borders. Now that is, it had nothing to do with the East African community. And when it got solved, you saw. So, of course, that is what has given a lot of lease of life to the son of the president who actually implemented that. I can tell you, if he goes to Rwanda, he's received like a film player because he did wonders. So that had nothing to do with the East African community and the common market and everything. It's like when a war breaks out, all those treaties are silent. They have nothing to offer. So it goes back to what you say. Who is leading a country is very important, particularly because East Africa is not yet a country. It's not a federation. It's not. We haven't achieved the East African Federation, which is the final limb of integration. So that is that. Now it is different from a person, for example, who refuses to admit you into Tanzania, saying that you are a musician and you are likely to perform in Tanzania, yet you don't have a work permit to work there, even when you have got, for example, a special pass to do so. Now, that immigration official is committing a non-tariff offense. You get the point? Now, that person is stopping you, because now administration is divided into, for example, especially East African Community administration. If I am to describe it properly, you have the cabals sitting at the top. Those are the presidents. And probably the council of ministers. Now, those are the cabals. Now you have these, the implementers of decisions taken from top to bottom. Now the implementing authority, you can call them the apparatchik in proper English. Then the population now, those are the ragtag and bobtail. Now for them, they expect everything to be done.
You have the ragtag and bobtail, then the
apparatchik, then the cabals at the top. Now, the linkages matter. The cabals take decisions, but implementation is done by these apparatchik. And these fellows can decide not to implement certain things. Why? It depends even on their age. In Tanzania, for example, we have the oldest civil service. The oldest people in civil service, in public service are in Tanzania, throughout the East African community. Now, that is why in terms of implementation, they are the slowest ship in the convoy. They are still tainted with the Ujamaa project. They still don't think that you can just emerge from the blue and erect a skyscraper. They still have this socialism mentality that actually everything must belong to the state. Whoever works, you must be working for the community, so that by the time you can no longer work, community works for you. And that was also a measure of economic understanding. And it is, those are the people that looked at you amassing wealth and keeping it in the bank and in land titles at home as holding wealth. This is, why are you holding? You don't have trust in society tomorrow? Work for society. Society will serve you when you can no longer work. Now, we still have those people actively involved in the administration of the Tanzanian all understanding. So when they are slow, and I can describe for you clearly the manner in which even negotiations take place, even parliament takes place, even everything, in terms of the East African community. One, Rwanda, for example, you will find that if there are 9 negotiators, there are 9 people talking, or 10, whether 5 have been outside for break and they return, they will still come and pursue the same as if they were there. One opinion. They have got one opinion. Burundi will wait for Tanzania to say anything and they will say, yeah, like our brothers have said, that's what we believe. That is Burundi. Uganda, you have got 9 delegation, a delegation of 9 people. Uganda is where you will find somebody respectfully disagreeing with the colleague. and that is Uganda. The manner in which we submit to say, I respectfully disagree with what my colleague has stated. And that is the way. Kenya, you will find clusters of 2, 4 people vending a certain opinion and 5 people vending an opinion slightly different from the 4. And because thereby reflecting the kind, like now, right now it is a 2-horse race in Kenya, and after elections they are going to elect yellow members. I can tell you that 4 members will come from one side of the coin, and 5 will come from another side, and they will be vending contrary opinions. Similar in terms of the 2 clusters. South Sudan, they don't know anything. They don't say much. They hold, first of all, South Sudan, most of them have got PhDs. Mm. Why? Because during the war, all exiles go to school. They are all professors. So, but they have a world of opinions so divergent that agreeing to a single opinion is itself now the subject of a PhD, another PhD. So I can tell you that that is how we debate. Everywhere, even negotiations. Now, Tanzanians, they will consult on every clause of an agreement you are trying to debate. They will consult on each and every clause, consulting back home. Finally, they will even consult on the signing. Now signing, they are very documented that they consulted. That is why they are the slowest ship in the convoy. I am saying this because it is correct. And for me, I'll always be accused of speaking the truth. I will never hide it. So that is how I want to be remembered. So that is the way the East African community is coached. Now, for the Congolese, I am going to leave the assembly before they arrive. And throughout the community, I don't know how they will be behaving. I was making a joke somewhere that, by the way, now we need to, because in Uganda, Parliament took a decision that there must be some holding rooms for members of Parliament with babies. So that is where they can begin now to breastfeed from after the session. So I also made an assertion that, by the way, introducing stores for guitars and all that would be important now that we are receiving
for entertainment.
Who may carry them as tools. So that is the thing. And the East African community, by the way, is working. It can be as slow as possible. But you feel it's work in progress. But I feel it is working.
Going back to Kenya, that is elections today, we've seen a number of observers.
Yes.
Uganda has sent, at least I'm reliably informed, we have the NUP principal, we have also Dr. Chiza Besigye, and many others that have left. But looking at politics in the East African region, more so now to look at Kenya, do we see political growth more so when it comes to multi-party dispensations that most of these countries agreed upon?
Now, first, how did we arrive at multi-party as a political dispensation? A lot of people, some Ugandans even think that somebody went to court and the government agreed that now we go multi-party. Others think we went for a referendum and the government agreed.
I believe it was pressure from the international community.
Those are lies. Africans acceded to a decision to go multi-party, majorly to qualify for grants.
Oh.
Yes, under the Africa Action Plan and NEPAD. And even a peer review mechanism was established to make sure that countries must fulfill what was enshrined under the Africa Action Plan. Now, the Africa Action Plan was an economic plan that was a conglomerate of majorly 4 plans. 4 plans that had been administered. One of the plans had been coached by President Thabo Mbeki of South Africa then. Another one was President Obasanjo, who was the president of Nigeria then. The other one was Abdoulaye Wade of Senegal then, and Bouteflika of Algeria then. Now, when the 4 people espoused economic programs and policies and wanted to subject them to the G8, the G8 said, no, converge all of those. We match up with what we call an Africa Action Plan, and the qualification to all of these should include, among others, freedom of political parties. That is number 1. 2, universal primary education. That is number 2. So even when UPE was introduced in Uganda, people clapped. They didn't know. They thought the government is waking up to do a lot of good things. They wanted to access those grants, access the grants. And it all emanated from when Gordon Brown, before he became the Prime Minister of Britain, was Chancellor of the Exchequer. When he was heading the IMF monetary, it was the IMF Chancellor of the Exchequer, but he was heading some IMF subcommittee. they took decisions that highly indebted poor countries should be forgiven their loans for as long as such money is subjected to universal primary education. Now, that is the genesis
of multi-party.
Not that people emerged, woke up from slumberland and decided that actually the population wanted to go multi-party. Ideologies, there is a demarcation in terms of ideologies. We have class structures, we have the proletariat, and these people now would want now to vend voices in the form of political organizations called the parties. Let us free them. No. So that is why in Uganda the catch message for freeing political parties was to the Jeko. It was not that you free parties. So they were not freed so that they can generally compete and introduce leaderships. No. Where it worked, it was because of the conditions obtaining on the ground. For example, in Kenya, it is incumbent upon everybody to understand that actually Kenya, their tribal demarcation is in the Kenya. That if a candidate is a Luo, for example, and I can tell you, you cannot deny this. When you are seated on the same table with Raila Odinga, what he's talking about is generally a decision of all the Luo. In fact, for all the constitutional amendments and the drafts that have been made, the Luo don't even read. Once Raila Odinga signs, they say, no, Baba Nasoma. We don't need to read. He read it. so that's our position. Baba Nasoma. And it happened very long ago when, for example, Jaramogi Odinga was agitating against some increment in fuel prices, like it is here. Very long ago, when he looked back, only federal laws were escorting him. When Obafemi Awolowo of Nigeria was also agitating against the same fuel prices when they actually had the oil, only fellow Yorubas were escorting him. So it is natural that when you have got very substantive tribal demarcations in a country, those demarcations, once a political party is elected by a person, ideally, by way of a figment of a fertile imagination, is the leader of that tribe. That political party now has got the numbers commensurate with the numbers of that tribe. So in Kenya it worked because then tribesmen elected political parties, and when they sit on a table, they can agree and form a bloc. So when you are now trying to analyze who will win in Kenya, you are now looking at one, registration capacity. Which regions have registered properly for voting? That is number one. Two, alliances. And not alliances in terms of political parties. No. Who are those allies that everybody has? When you have Honorable Kalonzo, then you know that all the Kambas are with you. When you have Gideon, and you have Gideon on one part, then you have got Ruto on the other part, then you know that the Kalenjin, in terms now of the subdivisions, have gone either side. When you have got Uhuru, then you know that in terms of Chiambu, in terms of Chikuyu, those people are with you. Now, when you take Joho, then you know that those Somalis and of course the coastal areas, they are with you. So you can even count the Kenyan election and know that the winner will get 11 million, the loser will get 10. And clearly, given even the scientific processes.
So in terms to political maturity within this region.
That is it. So in terms of Uganda, where, for example, government has incriminated sectarianism and tribalism, now we have emerged with one major tribe, and that is money. So now in Uganda, the politics is monetized because nobody has got a tribal voice. Nobody. We don't have anybody here that can say that he's on the negotiation table and what he has acceded to, the people are saying that is our man. No, it's not there. So it is now about one, money and the proletariat bandwagoning, which we call the celebrity panjandram.
What is that celebrity
panjandram? So somebody assumes leadership of a population, majorly because, for example, he has turned the funds into political supporters. So That is what is existing in Uganda. It is even temporary. It's not a permanent entity. It is subject to factors and combinations that we will obtain at the time. So I can safely tell you that in Uganda, we are heading for, again, a requirement to recreate the politics of Uganda. That is why in Uganda, we don't have political parties.
You are vice president of...
I am vice president of one in terms of registered political parties. But when you are supposed to talk about political parties that take a decision, not even NRM exists.
I saw a UPC man entering here and wondering when you said we don't have political parties.
And they are registered and they are there. But multipartyism does not refer to registered political parties. It refers to the operation of political parties to determine political climate of a country. In Uganda, we don't have it. So even in NRM, have you ever seen a situation where the president is worried that NEC is going to sit? They call it SEC, and he is not aware of what they will decide. Instead, they are the ones fearing that what will the man tell us now? In fact, when he invites them, they are all saying, by the way, how did we perform in the other generation? I'm sure he's angry. It is now him. So we are now going to be able to sit again, channel a new future for Uganda, if it is a future based on political parties. Because, you know, they say, when cobwebs unite, they can even tie up a lion. Now, the political parties in Uganda are cobs without webs.
Honorable,
so they can't tie up
it's
even
not
a
so
rabbit.
much on our side. Let me just have your parting shots regarding Kenyan politics and, of course, a relation to the East African community as they go to the polls today.
Yes. I just pray for the after effect. We already are in an election. People are voting. Our prayers now go to, for purposes that the after effects do not in any way stop the proper operations of business. Kenya is one of the biggest routes in terms of supply routes to the hinterland, which is Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi. So we do not want any problem to arise there, given the circumstances under which we are, because I can tell you that we have substantial price rises. The inflationary levels are so high. The ministers have already taken again another decision to hike over 35% in terms of common external tariffs for East Africans, and I don't know why they did that, because that again now increases the prices. I don't want to get there. You will invite me if you want me to discuss economics. I can give you even 2 hours. People may even begin to think I'm an economist. I just read. So we pray for the after effects. I know that all lawyers are now waiting because I know the Kenyan election might have to land into court. So we are ready. Trying to you know, somebody said that I can imagine now all lawyers are in the saunas and steams in Kenya, just waiting to eat money from politicians by majorly arguing simply the letter and spirit of the Constitution and jurisprudence. And you know, people think those are the two words we use. The letter and spirit of the Constitution and versus jurisprudence. Then we begin with the de minimis rule, what and all those things. So
before you go to those terms,
we are going to eat money in terms of court cases, but we pray. We don't lose lives simply because somebody wants to be a president of a country, especially if he doesn't want to lead for himself. If he wants to lead for the people, then don't allow people to die, because they don't really seek to die at the hand of your leadership.
Well, thank you so much, Honorable Fred Mukasambide, who happens to be a member in the East Africa Legislative Assembly, but also the Vice President of Democratic Party. Well, we'll keep on having him also to discuss more regarding, of course. Also, recently, we are seeing the opposition going into a number of...
Cataclysm.
Cataclysm. Hey. Okay, let me leave. We must leave. Till tomorrow, have a lovely day. Peace elections for the people of Kenya. See you.
The Tales of Kasozi, brought to you by Uganda Communications Commission.
Hello?
Hello?
This is Kasozi. How can I help you?
Hey,
Kaso's my brother. Long time. We last met when we were at campus. It's been a while, but you are the person I'm looking for.
Campus? Really?
Hey, you don't remember me?
Okay, so how can I help you?
I'm stuck in Gulu making millions and I need to urgently send money to my sick mother. But I can't find any mobile money agent near me. I've sent the money to your phone, as you can see the message. It might take a few minutes to come through, but I urgently need you to send the money to my mother. Let me send you her number and you send it to her chap.
My friend, I'm afraid your mom is going to die.
What?
Because I don't know you, I never went to campus, and I'm also in Gulu. So can we meet at CPS? We talk